Hey family, good morning. It's Tasha, Mom Bear Prepping. So you already know what time it is. Get your drink, pull up. Let's talk about it. So I want to talk about a specific comment that I got yesterday on my video. It was somebody who was talking about food preservation. They were talking about canning, the difference between canning and water bathing, and how they didn't realize it, and they felt silly that they didn't know that. Okay, so for me, I jumped right into pressure canning, but there's a lot of things that I've learned since then, things that I had to find out on my own, mistakes I had to make, things that people just don't really talk about. And all these canning videos that are out there, there's a lot of stuff that's not really discussed. Some stuff is, but it's not really, there's not really a super big importance put on it, and so it's skipped over, it's easily not retained, whatever. So I'm gonna go over several things that are just things, I guess, to know about canning in general. Okay, really good stuff. Okay, and I would love for you guys to chime in the comments, for you canners, folks that have been canning for years and years, the things that you guys have learned. So the first thing is water bathing and pressure canning, right? What's the main difference? Knowing which foods. This subscriber actually mentioned not realizing that meat and like soups and things like that had to be pressure canned. You can't just water bathe that stuff, okay? And that's the truth. So things like pressure can stuff is your low acid foods. That's basically all of your veggies. There is some exceptions, you guys, but basically all of your veggies, all of your meats, poultry, seafood, all of that stuff. Any kind of soups that have meat in them or veggies or whatever have to be pressure canned. Okay, you can't just take a recipe you saw somewhere and water bathe meat. The temperature, internal temperature, is not going to get high enough to then kill everything, and then botulism, you're going to have botulism. Okay, so understanding that, there's some really good literature that I'll try to link some stuff that's good literature and information and resources of where to go when you're first learning to can. Because what you want to do is, there's a lot of canners on YouTube, for example, to get recipes and get things. The problem is that not everybody does everything the right way or safely, or knows all these rules or knows these things. And so you could be possibly following something and following a video that's not really giving you the real, okay? High acid foods are the ones that you can water bathe. So that's why, like, all your jams, your jellies, your berries, anything that you pickle. So all these recipes that you can pickle, that type of stuff you can water bathe. Tomatoes, stuff like that. Okay. Remember, if you're following recipes like from an actual resource, a real resource, and you're going to be fine, and it's going to tell you whether you're going to water bathe or pressure can. What you could do is get some like the bulk canning book and go to those recipes, go to those sections, and it will have a water bathing section. It will have a pressure canner section where it talks about this stuff. And then also additionally, when you get into the recipe, it will tell you if you're pressure canning it or water bathing it. Okay. So that's the biggest difference between the two. I started with a pressure canner, which some people would say is scarier or harder. I just jumped right in. I watched 1,001 videos of what to do. I read, I researched, and I figured out what I needed to do, the steps, wrote it down, and then I just jumped in and did it. Okay. But people will say that water bathing is much easier, and it's kind of a step up, is kind of a inline, and then you go from water bathing to pressure canning. But that's not a rule. Okay, you don't have to do that. Okay, but if you're trying to just get your feet wet in the overall processes of stuff, learn water bathing first. It's very, very simple, very easy recipes, that type of thing. Okay, less steps. Okay. All right, so we've got that. The other thing that they don't tell you is there's very precise steps, right? Canning is absolutely safe if you follow the steps, right? That means you have to Make sure your jars are sanitized and clean. You know, you need to wipe the when you put the food in, you need to wipe the edge of the glass, make sure all the fats and everything is off, seasonings, whatever, before you put the lid on. Adding something as simple as adding vinegar to the water, to help so that you don't get the film on your jars. If you don't put some vinegar in your water in your pressure canner, your jars will come out with a white film. If you're wondering why your jars have coming out with a white film when you pressure can some stuff, that's why. So just put a little container, cup, maybe, I don't know, a fourth a cup of vinegar in the pressure canner, and that will help with that, okay? But there's very precise steps, okay? Building up the canner pressure, all that stuff. There's very precise steps. And that's why I say go to, you know, the Complete Ball guidebook, you know, go to these resources that show you the steps of how to can so that you don't do it. You have to debubble. What can you debubble with, right? These are steps that you can't miss. You have to do, because all these steps, if you do them right, you'll be safe, okay? Another big thing is, so electric pressure canners are a big thing now. They're coming out. The problem with that is that not all of them are safe, okay, or proper, right? They don't get up to the temperatures that they need to get up to. I think it's Homestead Rose Homestead. Oh, I can't believe that I'm messing up her name probably right now. She has some great videos on electric pressure canners and explaining why they would be good and not good. She has a video on several different types of them. It's very, very easy. You guys hear this kitty at the door. I'm inside and the cat is at the back door now making noise. But some of them are not good. So don't just take, oh, I got this cute pressure canner and I'm going to pressure can. It's electric. And then it ends up not doing what you're supposed to do. And then you have a product that ends up not working. Okay. I'm not a fan. I kind of like the old school. Now that I learned on an old school pressure canner, I kind of like that. I don't know that I would even, I guess it would be easier with an electric, and maybe once I tried it, I'd be like, oh, I'm not going back now. But I like the off-grid aspect of knowing how to can, and so that you could do that outside and continue to do that without power. Okay. Remember, we want to try to continue to learn these things so that we can have these skills and be able to do these things later when there's no power. The pressure buildup steps. So a lot of people write, oh, recipes. Hey, this, I'm doing a pint. It's 75 minutes. Hey, I'm doing quarts. It's 90 minutes. It's just very, very simple, right? Hey, you're just doing this. There's a build-up process, okay? You have to get the jars in there. You have to close it up. You have to bring the temperature up. Once you get it up, you know, you have to add your weight. There's very specific time periods that you're waiting for that steam to come up to pressure. Then you put it on, you know, you add your weight, or you put it on your number. If you have a T-fall like mine, you got to wait till that comes up. Then you got to time that, make sure that that is maintaining. Once you turn it down, there's a lot of steps, okay? And that is not really discussed. It is discussed in these videos, okay? It's not like they're just skipping that part. But it's missed, okay? And it can be kind of stressful remembering, okay, I've got to wait for 10 minutes for this to come up and steam. Okay, once I got the steam, you know, and I have a jiggle, I'm going to add my weight. Okay, I'm going to wait till it comes up. All right, now I'm going to turn it down. Where do you got to turn it down? You got to find the magic spot, right? Then once you turn it down, you have to make sure that it's maintaining that, okay, for 10 minutes. And then you're starting your time. So it could take, it's hours, okay, that you're canning, okay? When it's done, you're turning everything off. You're letting the pressure come down naturally. That takes quite a bit of time for it to come down on its own back to zero before you can open, release anything, take off weights and open it up, okay? So the entire process, if you had to, and especially if you had to prep the food, make some sort of food, make the soup first, whatever it is you're canning, you're talking about all day processes, depending on what you're doing, okay? So this fantasy of like, oh, it's just 75 minutes or it's only 90 minutes, get that out of your head, because there's steps, there's a process to this, and it takes quite a while, okay? Another thing is hot pack, cold pack. Okay, so that's just the difference of, are you putting the food in the jar? Is it in a raw form and you're putting it in the jar and you plan to can it like that? Or are you pre-cooking it, or are you cooking it all the way? What are you doing, right? And is it going into the jar hot pack or cold pack? That's what that means, okay? And if you're looking at recipe cards, it might say these things and you're like, I don't even know what cold pack, hot pack is. That's hot pack, cold pack. Is the food going in there raw, or have you cooked it and it's going in the jar hot? With that, hot food goes into hot jars. So if you're making jams, jellies, if you're making some kind of soup and it's hot, right? Or you've put food in there and you're putting a hot broth in there, okay? Warm jars, warm food, and also warm water in the canner when you go to put the jars in, right? You're not doing warm jars, warm food, and then putting it in a cold canner. You want to bring that canner up, that temperature of that water up. Same thing, cold. If you're cold packing something, it's raw, it's cold, the jar should be cold, and that water should be cold. You shouldn't be bringing up that canner and then it's hot and you're putting in these cold jars. That's just simple stuff to keep your jars from not cracking and breaking on you, okay? Let's talk about stacking jars. So nobody really talked about stacking jars. Can you find videos on all this type of stuff? Like if you searched, hey, what are the rules on stacking jars? You'll find people have videos and their opinions and all this stuff. In general, the basic rule is you don't want to stack jars. And I understand for purposes of, you know, the space you have, sometimes people will stack stuff. People will say that if you're going to stack stuff, that you're going to want to put either keep them in the original boxes that the jars came in and stack them like that, or putting another piece of cardboard in between jars. But for me, it's just a safety thing. I don't like stacking jars at all because I don't want to compromise the jars at all. I don't like that weight on the jars. For earthquake and jars falling, I don't like that. That's just another layer of them falling. I'm just a fan of trying to find shelving that will fit your regular jars and just having one thing. Rings off, okay? And that's so that you can, if a jar is compromised and the ring is off, you have a better chance of identifying that sooner than later. But a lot of people that do stack, they do keep the rings on there because it does keep stuff a little bit more stronger if you're stacking. But I'm not a fan of stacking. And I'm just going to say you need to make that, you know, your own opinion of that. You're going to do your own research, you're going to do your own stuff, and then you're going to figure out what you're going to do. Rings off. So basically, you know, when I get done canning, I put the jars on the, this is another thing. You always want to have jars on a towel or some sort of foamy, you know, pad. Never put jars out of the canner straight onto the counter, okay? You want them to be on a towel, on a kitchen towel at a minimum, so that they don't break, the heat, all of that, just on a towel. I usually leave them alone for a couple hours, and then after a couple hours, I take the rings off and I let them continue to do their thing for 24 hours. I leave them there for 24 hours. I don't touch them. I usually take the rings off within a couple hours, right? Within a couple hours, even within an hour, I want to know, have the jars sealed or not? Now, the whole sealing process might take a while. That's why you're letting it sit there for 24 hours. But I like to see right away. I like my jars to seal right away. And if they don't, that gives me concern. And I'll usually, if something doesn't seal within a couple hours, an hour, I'm putting it in the fridge and I'm just pulling it off as it's not a long-term can, right? It didn't seal, and I just put it in the fridge, and then we'll eat it, whatever it is. Nobody talks about moving canned food, right? You pressure can, you water bed, you have all these jars of food, and nobody talks about the day when you have to move. How do you move that food? You know, because you have to keep that food regulated temperature-wise somewhat. You have to keep it in a cool, dark place. You can't just throw food out in a garage, right? Because those seals will start popping, possibly if it gets too cold or too hot, right? And moving might cause a problem depending on where you're moving. Different temperatures and zones and elevations and different places that you're going could be an issue, okay? Not to mention moving it, right? Glass jars that are breakable and are full of food, and trying to move those in totes or boxes or whatever. Not to mention people seeing it, right? So, if you're about to can your life away, I would probably be trying my best. Are you in your final location? Now, I'm not telling you that so that you don't can until you get to your final location, but just keep that in mind as you're moving forward with your plans. Maybe you're close to moving, whatever, right? For example, I was in the military, and so I waited to can until the very, very end of my career. I waited till literally it was like the last 6 months. And even that, knowing we had one final move, even that was a lot of food to move. I canned just enough where it was a pain in the butt to move it. And I can't imagine if I had a whole pantry or a whole room of product that I would have had to move. That would have been a nightmare, okay? Another thing they don't talk about, or they do talk about, is rebel canning. So this is canning stuff that's not approved to be canned, right? USDA, it hasn't been bought off on being safe. A lot of people though still can this stuff, and will say that, well, it's not been proven to be unsafe. It's just been deemed unsafe because it hasn't been tested, if that makes sense, okay? And so again, I'm not going to tell you what to can, not can. I can butter, I can bacon. Those are not approved methods of canning, right? And so what you want to do is, when you're getting in the mindset of starting to can, and you're researching the stuff you want to do, you need to research, is it an approved method? And then you're going to make a decision, okay? I would say start with the stuff that's approved though, okay? Until you learn the process, you learn things, and then later you can make your own decisions. I'm not going to tell you what to do, okay? Oh, we didn't even say that. Reusable lids. So, when I first started canning, which wasn't that long ago, you guys, lids, the older lids, a lot of videos that I was watching, lids didn't used to be reusable. It was just one use, right? You canned with them. Once you pop that lid off that jar, then the lid went in the trash. You could reuse the jar if it wasn't compromised, and you could reuse the lids. But now that little rubber sealing inside the lids can be reused. And of course, there's all types of other reusable lids on the market, Tatler, different stuff. I've never used those plastic lids. I've only used metal, but you can now reuse those metal, the lids, okay? But that's something that I kind of had to learn, because I was throwing them away because the videos I was watching were older, and you were supposed to boil them and all this stuff, and you don't necessarily have to do that anymore, and they're reusable. And so these are things that you'll just learn as you're canning stuff. All right, another thing is foods that you don't can. There's certain stuff you're not going to can. Learned early on, you don't put sage in jars. The sage, the way it breaks down, it really funkifies the food, right? So that's a seasoning that you don't use when you're canning. You're not canning nuts. You're not canning grains like rice and pastas. This stuff that expands is the stuff that you're not putting in there. Thickeners, okay? Different thickeners, flour, stuff like that. You're not putting that in jars. Again, you just have to learn this stuff, but there's going to be certain stuff that you're not going to put in jars and you're not going to can, okay? So like, for example, a soup that comes with noodles, right? You're not going to can the soup with noodles. You're just going to put all the ingredients together and make the soup. And then in theory, you would add the noodles. You would boil the noodles later and add that to the soup if it was like, let's say, chicken noodle soup, okay? Let's see what else. Oh, washing jars. Nobody really discussed opening jars and washing jars. Opening jars, there is ways you can do it. Pop it open with a knife or a spoon that are kind of cool. But in my opinion, those don't happen all the time. They don't work all the time. And so just a good old hand pop open like a beer bottle opener. That's all you need, okay? So make sure you have those. A lot of hand can openers have those on there, so you can just pop it up like that. you basically want to be able to pop it open so that you can do the least amount of damage so that you can reuse the lid, okay? And then washing and putting away jars. After you let them sit for 24 hours, they've sealed, they're sitting there. This is something they don't talk about. You got to wash the jars. So you're literally putting them in the sink. You're using hot soapy water and a scrubby, and you're scrubbing the jar clean. You're getting everything off the rim, off the top that might have been there, food that seeped out while it was cooking. The jar sticky. Maybe you have that white foam because you didn't use the vinegar. So you're washing that off. Whatever it is, you got to wash your jars, and then you're going to dry them. I usually wash them with hot soapy water. I put them back on the towel. I wipe off. I usually paper towel the top so right away, so that you don't get those water spots on the top of the lid. So I usually paper dry them, and then once they're dry, then that's when I Sharpie on the top what it is and the date I did it. I don't do dates like the day. I just do the month and the year. It's up to you what you want to do. And be specific of what you're doing, right? Don't just, so because you might not be eating this stuff for months later or years later. And so you want to be specific on what it is that you can, because maybe you can't identify it, right? So washing your jars and getting them clean, that's like a thing that they didn't really think. And I just thought about it, and I Googled, and I had to find a couple of videos of some ladies showing how you're doing, that you have to wash your jars afterwards, okay? Because they'll be sticky, that type of thing. Okay, let me just make sure that I got all my notes. Washing jars, what not to put in. So some tips. Read research, okay? I'm going to put some links of research resources in the description box below, so that you can take a look at that. Some of my favorite canning books that I like, that have recipes but also have information of teaching you the steps and the methods. Print out the cards, so you can go online and print out the cards that actually tell you all the pressure canning times for canning, right? It will tell you, hey, this type of meat, are you pressure canning it? It will tell you how long you do for pints, for quarts. It will tell you maybe possibly the difference if you hot packed it or raw packed it. But it will tell you all the times, right? Additionally, these cards, if you print them out, will tell you the headspace you need in the jar too. So you fill it up. How much headspace do you need from the top of the jar? Basically, you're not filling it so that you have that amount of headspace. It will tell you how much headspace, all of that stuff. Okay, so I like these little recipe cards, the recipe size. I printed them out, put them on recipe cards, and put them in my recipe box, okay? And I usually just glance at them just to make sure that the recipe that I'm looking at gave me the correct times for what I'm doing, okay? And then cheat notes. When I first started pressure canning, you guys, when I talk about, okay, you got to wait 10 minutes, you got to let the pressure come up, then you got to let it go for 10 minutes. Okay, then you got to put the weight on. Okay, then you got all these steps. I wrote them down on stickies, and I put them up on my kitchen cupboard. And I did not can without looking at that and telling myself the steps as I was going step by step. A list of steps to not miss: wiping the jars, debubbling, right? All these things, sanitizing my jars, different things like that. All these steps, I wrote them down on a sticky, and I had them right there on the kitchen cupboard so that I remembered these steps as I was pressure canning and learning the process, right? Once you do it and you've done it 1,000 times, then obviously it becomes just natural and you'll remember this stuff, okay? But you still might miss stuff. Putting it, hey, make sure you put some vinegar in the pressure canner, in the water, right? All these things matter, I guess you could say. So I hope that pressure canning and learning how to preserve food in this way is super satisfying, and it's not that difficult, really, once you learn how to do it. And it's a great skill to have, because you can do this over an open flame outside, which could literally be a way that you preserve food later on when there's no power, there's no internet, there's no nothing, okay? And so this is a skill set that we need to bring back and teach our children how to do, okay? So I hope you enjoyed this. If you've been canning for a while, if you feel like there's something I missed, put it in the comments below. Let people know the things you learned, tips, tricks, other things that you think should have made the list, right, that I'm not thinking about. Put them in the comments and let's talk about it, and let's teach the group. I I like the fact that she mentioned that, and I immediately was like, you know what? I was thinking like there is quite a few things that I wish I would have known when I first started canning that I just kind of had to learn on my own. And so I think I'm going to do the video on that. So thank you for that. Thank you for the comment. I hope I didn't embarrass you, but I mean, you put the comment out there, so I don't think you're going to be embarrassed, but hopefully this was helpful. Okay. And I will see you guys tomorrow in the next video. Take care. Bye.